Tansei, I'm Krisanachkate. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. The Parole Board of Canada has granted day parole for Brayden Bushby, the man who was convicted of manslaughter in the death of Barbara Kentner, who died in Thunder Bay in 2017 after being hit with a trailer hitch. Bushby applied for full parole, however, he was denied and instead granted day parole for 6 months to a community-based residential facility when bed space becomes available. Bushby can leave the facility during the day but must return at nighttime for a 10 p.m. curfew. He cannot consume alcohol or drugs or enter into any drinking establishment, and Bushby cannot contact any of his previous victims' families or certain individuals. Last year, Bushby's day parole was suspended for several breaches of his conditions, which included alleged drinking and driving and allegations of theft and associating with people he was advised not to be with. The parole board also noted a Confederate flag was tattooed on Bushby's chest while on parole. And just last August, Bushby was also observed cutting a swastika into the institution's lawn. Bushby was sentenced to 8 years in prison in 2021 with time served. We'll have more in our evening news on this decision. Saskatchewan RCMP is requesting the public's assistance following the death of a man in the Musomine First Nation located north of North Battleford. On Monday, December 8th at around noon, RCMP received a report of a man in need of medical help at a home in Musomine First Nation. When Mounties arrived, they found an injured man and provided first aid. However, paramedics later pronounced him deceased. RCMP have since identified the man as 59-year-old Arnold Thomas from the Soto First Nation. His family has been notified. RCMP Major Crimes now deem Thomas's death as suspicious. RCMP is now asking anyone to come forward who may have information about Thomas's death. RCMP also want to know who Thomas was in contact with between Thursday, December 4th and the day he died. Today marks 10 years since the final report from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was released, and AFN, the Assembly of First Nations, are once again calling on all levels of government, institutions, and all Canadians to renew their commitment to the 94 calls to action.
The Assembly of First Nations is also using the day to press Canada to legislate Indian residential school or IRS denialism as a hate crime, something Chiefs spoke about earlier this month at their annual General Assembly in Ottawa. In a press release, the AFN said that IRS denialism has no place in Canada and that it is rooted in ignorance and harmful to survivors, First Nations, and all Canadians. National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak wrote, "On this anniversary, we encourage all Canadians to reflect on our shared history, on what has been done and what remains to be done. We must reaffirm our individual and collective responsibility to hold space for truth, to listen, to educate, and to act." Woodhouse-Nepenak went on to encourage everyone who hasn't yet to read the 94 calls to action and to find a role in moving the work forward. We'll have more reaction on tonight's APTN National News.
Thank you, TR. Parliament has been assessing whether to deem First Nations policing an essential service. Since October, the Parliamentary Committee in Ottawa has been studying Indigenous policing and public safety. Testimonies have also been heard from current and former chiefs across Canada. Now, some people are looking for more assurances. APTN Savannah Craig reports.
I've lost 2 of my children. My daughter was shot and killed by your policing. My son died in police custody 5 months after.
Martha Martin called for change following the deaths of her 2 children, calls she made at the Assembly of First Nations Special Chiefs meeting 1 year ago. Years after the death of her 2 children, fatal interaction for First Nations continue with police.
Too often, discriminatory police action leads to serious injuries or deaths. Over-policing on reserve, over-policing off reserve, under-policing on reserve, and over-representation of First Nations people in federal corrections.
Within 3 months near the end of 2024, 15 Indigenous people died while either in police custody or during interactions with police.
When people lack access to adequate safe housing, schools, and community resources, it often leads them down a path that ends with the justice system and encounters with police.
National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak has taken the issue to a parliamentary committee on Indigenous affairs. where she gave testimony urging for First Nations policing to be declared an essential service.
First Nations police embody community values. They lead with peace before force, but they are underappreciated.
A move she believes will reduce fatal experiences between First Nations and police.
To be effective, First Nations policing must be rooted in community values and not colonial models.
Since October, the committee has been studying Indigenous policing and public safety, inviting testimony from many, including Quebec's provincial police and both current and former chiefs from across Canada.
Despite having the main RCMP detachment less than a mile away, they still felt unsafe and unprotected. Citizens feared calling the police or didn't trust they would get justice. Some remembered the days they were dragged to residential school by the RCMP.
Deeming First Nations policing an essential service has been discussed for years.
That in 2019, the Prime Minister at the time, Trudeau, had directed the ministers to start taking a path toward making Indigenous policing an essential service. We're now pushing 2026 here.
Chiefs were reassured during the election when Prime Minister Carney recognized First Nations policing as an essential service during our AFN forum.
Something needs to be done.
There have also been calls to track police violence towards First Nations.
At our last December assembly, chiefs were united in calling for a federal inquiry into discriminatory police practices after more than a dozen First Nations died in the custody of colonial police forces across Canada last summer and fall.
A year ago, the AFN passed a resolution to demand a national Indigenous-led public inquiry into police violence. 1 year later, no inquiry has been made.
Enforcement of First Nations laws, bylaws.
At this year's assembly, Public Safety Minister Gary Ananda-Sangri said an inquiry is not on the table.
I would much rather put the energies into implementing the number of recommendations that already exist and moving forward on them, because they will speak to a lot of the underlying challenges that a national inquiry may reveal.
Ananda-Sangri says Ottawa will soon launch a civilian review commission, independent from the RCMP. It will review complaints of officer misconduct and provide recommendations to RCMP policies and practices.
How many more of our people have to die at the hands of your police?
For Martin, this is not enough. Her daughter Chantel Moore was shot and killed off reserve by a New Brunswick police officer.
Not only live on reserve, how do we make it better for people who live off reserve so that they're not feeling threatened whenever they're pulled over by a police officer?
APTN News requested an interview from the National Chief to discuss declaring First Nations policing an essential service. We were not granted an interview after repeated attempts.
We shouldn't have to be there to remind them, because these are people who lost their lives. And, you know, the fact that we have to keep coming forward and bringing it to light and reminding people that this is still an ongoing problem, it's discouraging.
Savannah Craig, APTN National News, Montreal.
While flood conditions are easing in parts of southern BC this week, there are still warnings that rain could return. We'll bring you the latest from Tina House. Stay with us. Welcome back. Denison Mines recently held meetings in Saskatoon to determine the future of its Wheeler River uranium project. The project, located in the Athabasca Basin in northern Saskatchewan, would be the first new uranium mine in 11 years, following the completion of Cigar Lake in 2014. Several speakers used the meetings to share concerns, support, and questions about the Wheeler River project. The hearings were held in two parts, one in October and one this past week, with the latest focused on environmental risks and Indigenous consultation. English River, Lac La Ronge, Birch Narrows, Kanipic Métis Local No. 9 and Métis Nation Saskatchewan all presented. Concerns included woodland caribou habitat loss and the risk of uranium byproducts leaking into the northern waterways. The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission now has up to 120 days to decide whether the Wheeler project can move forward. To British Columbia now, where an atmospheric river has dumped a record amount of rain into the BC and Washington coast and is causing chaos as residents and farmers struggle to save their livestock and properties. APTN's Tina House was there and has this story.
This latest atmospheric river that's hit BC and Washington state has dumped a deluge of rain in this area. As you can see behind me, the Nooksack River has crossed its banks into Canada and is now covering the Sumas Prairie here in Abbotsford, BC. This area was once dry, and now there's an estimated 10 feet of water.
20 minutes, I could see the bottom of the hut. Yeah, the corn stalk. Yeah.
And just down the road, we met Jeffrey Spitters, a third-generation poultry farmer who owns this farm. We were standing with Jeffrey as the breach of the Nooksack River was spilling under the railroad tracks onto his 30 acres of property.
I've got maybe 3 feet until it's in my barns with my animals. So.
How many animals do you have?
So I've got 40,000 birds here on this farm right now. Yeah. So it's. I'm hopeful that we're able to get through this, and this is where we sit, but we won't know until the high mark is done.
And just as we were shooting this interview, the water moved quickly at the end of the driveway, and within a couple more minutes, the water had completely covered his driveway, making it a fast escape as we all got to safety. Further down the road, police and city officials were helping residents flee the area. Water started to cross over roadways, and emergency officials were rushing to close those roads and enforce evacuation orders in Sumas Prairie West, as residents were trying their best to watch and secure their properties, while the water kept rising, carrying all types of debris. As of Thursday night, the water reached as far as Highway 1, stranding people in their vehicles for hours. Highway 1 was closed, and more evacuation orders were given as the water rose quickly. Friday morning, Highway 1, which is the main highway from the Lower Mainland, remained closed. Officials held a press conference to give an update.
As difficult as the last few days have been, there is more rain in the forecast. Now is the time for people in flood areas. If you have not done so already, pack a grab-and-go bag. Make it ready. Have the essentials that you need if you are asked to evacuate suddenly. Include items like seasonal clothing, medications, and important documents like your insurance.
And as of Friday morning, the water was 1 inch away from the chickens at the Urania farm. Many here are saying that this is a repeat of what happened in 2021, when another atmospheric river flooded Sumas Prairie, which was once the Sumas Lake before being drained and used for agriculture. But hopes for properties being safe are sinking as the water is expected to reach its peak later today. Tina House, APTN National News, Abbotsford.
Now to our friends in Australia. From the desert to the sea, Torres Strait Islanders are taking a new look at tourism as a way of creating jobs and developing the economy of the outer lands. This time, they're taking a grassroots approach, consulting with Community First to ensure any projects are fully supported. NITV's Sylvia Tabua reports.
A hidden gem in one of Australia's remotest communities, the Torres Strait. Bardo Island has one of the few outer island tourism ventures. It recently hosted a workshop on a council-funded survey about what the community wants and needs in the tourism space.
We wanted to go into our community and listen to them. What are their aspirations around economic development? What does economic development means to them?
The results were clear, with demands for local control and job creation to help with the high cost of living on the islands.
There's not enough job opportunity for our people. If tourism comes, it will bring employment and it'll be more for businesses, as we'll have more traffic of people and more money coming into community.
High costs of freight, flights, charter boats all impact not just daily life, but the viability of business in the Straits.
My role there is to support those tourism operators or aspiring Indigenous tourism operators that want to start their own business, because there definitely is a lot of opportunities here in relation to tourism. It's a beautiful place.
What tourism there is goes to the regional capital Wyburn, Thursday Island. However, there's limited benefit to the remote outer islands like Bardu. But 2 years ago, Nancy Nona's enterprise on Bardu was listed as one of top 50 tourism destinations by Forbes magazine. Her family sees the potential and appreciates the council's efforts.
A positive thing.
Next, the council will develop an action plan to fulfill the community's aspirations.
Sylvia Tabua at Bardu Community in the Torres Strait for NITV.
We now want to tell you about last week's web poll results. Last week we asked, do you feel the court rulings will lead to real improvements in water access and housing for First Nations? 61% voted no, 22% said yes, and 17% were unsure. Next we asked, are you confident essential services will be maintained while the federal government reduces its workforce? 69% said no, 17% voted yes, and 14% were unsure. And lastly, we asked, do you believe residential school denialism is growing in Canada? An overwhelming majority said yes at 69%, 19% saying no, and the rest were unsure at 12%. Thank you to all who took the time to vote. Our new set of questions will be up on our website at aptnnews.ca on Tuesday. A group of Inuit students in northern Quebec got to go on a unique trip in southern Ontario. We'll tell you why when we come back. Stay with us. On the east coast, Charlottetown -5, Halifax -2 in rain. Cartwright -3 in flurries, Happy Valley, Goose Bay flurries as well at -4. Quebec City -3 and sunny, Saguenay -6. -2 in Sarnia, partly cloudy in Toronto at -1. Sioux Lookout, sun's out, -21. Big Trout Lake, -16. God's Lake, -19. Puckatawagan, -22 and sunny. Clear skies in Winnipeg at -20. Barons River, -22. -25 in Regina, -30 in Saskatoon. -29 in Uranium City. Buffalo Narrows, -26. On the west, Grand Prairie, +1. Peace River, -15. -4 in Edmonton, Calgary, 5. 8 in rain in Vancouver, Quesnel, 0. Dease Lake, -20. Fort Nelson, -23. -40 in Dawson, Beaver Creek, -37. -22 in Norman Wells and sunny there, Wrigley, -31. -32 in Sax Harbor, Colville Lake, -27. -25 in Chesterfield, Whale Cove, -25. In the Iqaluit, -22, Arctic Bay, -29. From southern Ontario to northern Quebec, a Kitchener Catholic elementary school recently opened its doors to a group of students visiting from Kangirsuk, a remote Inuit village. CTV's Spencer Turcott now on this experience of cultural exchange and discovery.
The bright lights of Niagara Falls has most kids wide-eyed, but when students from a remote Inuit village in the Arctic tundra of Quebec visited,
we don't have trees up here.
Their eyes were practically popping out of their heads. What sparked this cross-country and, quite frankly, cross-cultural visit? It all started when Joseph Minaluka was teaching his Kangirsuk students English, their first language being Inuktitut. He would set up regular Zoom calls between his students in the north and the students of one of his former teachers at St. Daniel Catholic Elementary School in Kitchener.
I firmly believe that we all have that one educator that really kind of changed our lives or touched us in a way. And so for me, that's Carlos Roque.
Carlos taught Joseph nearly 20 years ago. As the Zoom calls between students progressed, their bonds grew, as did their curiosity. So with the help of funding grants, the students from Kangirsuk came to Kitchener.
Most students that actually attended the trip have never left their village.
A village of roughly 550 residents. Many things they experienced in southern Ontario surprised them.
I'd say fresh fruits. We don't really get to have much fresh produce up here.
They had never seen squirrels.
The St. Daniel teacher Carlos Roque said the Quebec students taught them things too.
Well, one of the fanciest things that we had, actually, we got to try beluga whale. Just watching them come with their clothing that's made from animals up there.
In April, the Kitchener students will get a more immersive experience when the roles reverse and they travel to Kangirsuk.
I'm a bit unsure about, there are polar bears and stuff there.
There will be a lot to learn.
If you don't want to take the bus, you can always drive your Ski-Doo or ATV to school. We also have a culture class, and the girls learn how to sew, the boys learn how to hunt.
The small community of Kangirsuk will have to plan ahead with food supply, given they'll have an extra 30 or so mouths to feed. The teachers at Souchewit School say this cultural exchange filled with friendship and exploration has led to better attendance of students, something all schools in the north struggle with. And while both communities may seem like they couldn't be farther apart,
it is easier to build upon the similarities between two communities rather than dwell on the differences.
Spencer Turcott, CTV News, Kitchener.
And our Christmas language segment is back again today. It's APTN National News version of the 12 Days of Christmas. Here's some teachings from the Haida Nation this holiday season, marking 6 APTN workdays left until the holidays.
So sing light la Skaskwansing Hanadi Kigaga. My Haida name is Skaskwansing and my English name is Shyla Cross. So my first word is happy. Goodingite la. Goodingite la. It's goodingite la, which means happy. So things like delicious food make me happy, and pretty Christmas lights and family time. So when I was young, when my grandparents were still alive, we would have big family dinners in their basements, and all my cousins and I would be there. My mom and her brothers would be there. My grandparents have a lot of grandkids, so there'd be a lot of us kind of around the same age. And we'd all be playing upstairs. My second word is family. Ya kalang, ya kalang, ya kalang, which is also family. So there's a lot of family time around the holidays. Family is coming home from maybe the city for the holidays. So I started learning the language, I guess, just like when I was born, like simple words for body parts and for food. Like, you know, there was certain foods that we didn't know the English word for. I learned a lot of language when I was in high school. I learned a lot of nouns. And then the third word is haulaye, which is delicious. So lots of delicious food, delicious baking. All three of my words tied together. It's delicious. Haulaye. Gudingay la salana singay klegan. That translates to Merry Christmas in Haida.
And that's your daytime newscast for this Monday, December 15th. We're back again for your evening newscast later today. Please join us then. From all of us at APTN National News, thank you for watching. We'll see you again in a few hours. Except.